I was still wearing my wedding dress when I realized I wasn't safe. The room was too quiet, the lights too soft, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until your thoughts get loud. I remember staring at my hands, the ring catching the glow from the city outside, and feeling my chest tighten for a reason I couldn't explain. If you've ever trusted someone and felt that sudden drop in your stomach, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this don't start the way we expect. The suite smelled like fresh linen and expensive flowers, but underneath it was something colder, something wrong. I had waited my whole life for stability, for love that didn't disappear, and yet fear had shown up before the morning did. I kept telling myself I was just overwhelmed, just tired, just imagining things. But my body already knew the truth. My mind wasn't ready to face. That night didn't end in celebration. It marked the beginning of everything falling apart. I became a bride only hours before I realized I might disappear. I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed that looked like something borrowed from another life. White petals rested on sheets. Soft gold light filled the room. Everything was quiet in a way that felt staged, like the world was holding its breath. I should have felt chosen. I should have felt safe. I was newly married, wrapped in luxury, standing inside a future that looked perfect from the outside. But I was also an orphan, a preschool teacher, a woman who had never belonged to powerful rooms like this one. The contrast pressed against my chest. As I waited, I noticed how silence can change shape. It stops being peaceful and starts becoming heavy. Somewhere nearby, something shifted. I felt it before I understood it, like a warning moving through my body instead of my mind. Nothing obvious had happened yet. No raised voices, no broken glass. Just a quiet moment that refused to feel right. That was when I understood that joy can turn fragile without asking permission. That night was supposed to mark the beginning of my marriage. Instead, it marked the moment my sense of safety cracked. And once something breaks like that, you never look at love the same way. I did not grow up believing anyone would save me. I learned early how to stand on my own, because there was no one else to lean on. I moved through childhood and adulthood without a family name to open doors or a safety net to catch me. I became a preschool teacher because children understood something adults often forgot: how to offer trust without conditions. My life before marriage was quiet and self-contained. I paid my bills, showed up for my students, and told myself that stability was something you built alone, piece by piece. Still, there was a part of me that wanted to rest, not in luxury, but in consistency. I wanted someone who stayed. When I met Ryan, he felt like that rest. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady. He paid attention to small things about me. He never made my past feel like something to overcome. Being with him felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. His world was larger than mine. More money, more influence, more eyes watching every move. I noticed how carefully he navigated it, how conversation shifted when his family was involved. I told myself that was normal for people with power. Looking back, I see how badly I wanted to believe I was finally chosen. I thought love had found me because I had earned it through patience. I did not realize that the very things that made me adaptable were also the things that made me vulnerable, and that truth would surface sooner than I ever expected. I remember the moment the air shifted. 1 second, I was floating inside the calm I had waited my whole life for, and the next, I felt it tighten, like a door closing somewhere I could not see. Ryan stepped away to take a call, and something in him changed. His shoulders stiffened, his voice dropped. He looked less like a newlywed and more like someone bracing for impact. I told myself it was stress, that powerful lives carried heavy conversations. Still, my chest would not settle. Then his sister appeared. She did not knock or ease her way in. She moved like fear had pushed her through the room. Her hands shook as she pressed something heavy into mine. I remember how wrong it felt, holding cash on my wedding night, how my first instinct was to give it back. I could not understand why she looked at me like time was running out. I kept searching her face for context, for a misunderstanding that would make everything make sense again. My mind refused the idea that danger could exist in a place this beautiful, but my body knew better. My heart was racing, my skin prickling, every instinct screaming that happiness does not arrive with panic attached to it. I did not run. I did not ask the right questions. I stood there believing love could not hide something this dark. Only later did I understand that this was the warning. And that night was not the beginning of my marriage. It was the first step into something. I woke to sunlight spilling across polished floors, bright enough to erase shadows but not memory. The house was already awake, moving with a smooth efficiency that felt rehearsed. Breakfast smells drifted through the air, soft voices, perfect timing. Everything looked exactly how it should. Inside, I felt anything but normal. My body was still carrying the warning from the night before, even as everyone else acted like nothing had happened. I watched hands pour coffee, straighten napkins, turn pages of a newspaper, all with the same careful calm. No one mentioned the fear. No one acknowledged me. His father radiated authority without raising his voice. It lived in the way he sat, in how the room adjusted around him. His mother's calm was sharper, quieter, the kind that notices everything and says nothing. I felt measured, evaluated, and dismissed all at once. What unsettled me most was how deliberate the silence felt. This was not denial born from confusion. This was control. By pretending nothing was wrong, they made it clear that reality belonged to them, not to me. I realized then how dangerous politeness can be when it is used as a shield. No one needed to threaten me. Ignoring the truth was enough. As I sat there, invisible in a house that suddenly felt too large, I understood something clearly for the first time. If I stayed quiet, I would disappear inside their version of normal. That morning, without saying a word, I decided I would start looking for answers on my own, no matter the cost. I waited until the house emptied itself of noise. Doors closed, engines faded. The quiet felt heavier than before, but it gave me cover. I moved through the hallway slowly, listening to my own breathing. Sophie's room sat at the end, untouched, like she had left in a hurry. When I stepped inside, the air felt different, personal, fragile. Her bed was unmade, blankets twisted like someone had risen too fast. I noticed the desk last, papers scattered. A small notebook left open, as if it had been forgotten on purpose or abandoned mid-thought. My hands shook when I touched it. I told myself I was invading privacy, but fear pushed louder than manners. The pages were uneven, pressed hard in places, light in others. I felt panic embedded in the paper. As I read, my stomach tightened. This was not confusion or imagination. This was someone trying to warn me in the only way she could. I remember the moment my doubt disappeared. The room felt smaller. My future narrowed. What I had walked into was deliberate, planned, and already in motion. Footsteps sounded in the hall, and I froze. I closed the notebook exactly how I found it, my heart racing so hard it hurt. Nothing happened, but I knew something had changed. I left the room knowing I could not unsee what I had learned. Whatever this family was hiding, it was real, and now it was tied to me. That certainty settled in my chest, heavy and permanent, marking the moment my life crossed a line. I sat alone with the notebook's weight still pressing on me, knowing instinct alone was no longer enough. I needed proof, something solid, something that existed outside fear. I opened my laptop and began searching the family name, expecting resistance, not perfection. Article after article praised their success, their generosity, their leadership. The language was polished, rehearsed. It felt too clean. I kept scrolling, changing keywords, following instincts instead of headlines. That was when I found the gaps, stories that ended abruptly, mentions of incidents with no follow-up, silence where consequences should have lived. Eventually, I found a forgotten corner of the internet, a blog post written without protection or polish. It described a construction collapse years earlier, workers injured, families grieving, and then nothing. Settlements, disappearances, records altered until tragedy became rumor. My chest burned as I read. This was not mismanagement. This was erasure. Money used like a sponge, soaking up responsibility until nothing recognizable remained. Then I saw his name. Not as a villain, not as a hero, just present, connected, close enough to know, close enough to benefit from silence. The realization felt physical, like betrayal moving through my bloodstream. I closed the computer and sat in the quiet, shaking. This was no longer about one family protecting itself. This was a system designed to survive by sacrificing others. And I understood something clearly then. I had not married into wealth. I had married into a lie built on buried truth, paid silence, and power that expected obedience. Once I saw it, there was no way to pretend ignorance or safety still existed anywhere for me. She asked to meet me somewhere public, ordinary, a place where fear could hide behind routine. I remember noticing how carefully she watched the room, how her hands never fully stopped shaking. This was not guilt. It was terror that had been practiced for years. As she spoke, the shape of my marriage changed in my mind. What I thought was urgency became strategy. What I thought was love became timing. The truth landed slowly, then all at once. I was chosen because I had no one powerful standing behind me, no family name, no lawyers, no protection. If something went wrong, there would be no noise. I felt hollow as I understood how intentional it all was. The rushed ceremony, the pressure to settle in quickly, the expectation that I would stay quiet and grateful. I had been placed, not welcomed. The most painful realization came when I understood Ryan's role. He was not unaware. He was not innocent. He had seen enough to know the cost of speaking up, and fear had shaped him into silence. He loved me, but not enough to save me on his own. Sitting there, I felt something crack and reform inside me. Running would be easy. I could disappear, take the warning, save myself. But escape would leave everything else intact. The lies, the buried harm, the power that expected obedience. For the first time, I saw a different path, one that terrified me more than leaving. Staying meant resistance. Staying meant truth. And as much as I wanted safety, I knew I would never forgive myself if I walked away knowing what I knew now. When I left that meeting, my fear had not disappeared, but it had changed direction. I went to Sophie that night knowing fear had finally become a shared language between us. Neither of us needed explanations anymore. We moved with quiet agreement, the kind that forms when truth leaves no room for denial. The house felt different after dark. Halls stretched longer. Every sound carried weight. We avoided lights, trusting memory more than sight. Our steps measured, breaths shallow. I felt my courage not as confidence, but as the decision to keep moving despite the tremor in my hands. The plan lived only in our minds. No notes, no second chances. We followed instincts shaped by years of living under the same roof, knowing where silence lived and where it broke. When we reached the study, time slowed. My pulse filled my ears as I searched, touching spines, drawers, surfaces that carried authority. Then I found it. Proof that did not argue or soften itself. Proof that confirmed everything the fear had been whispering. I remember thinking how small the moment looked compared to what it meant. A single object, easily hidden, capable of shattering years of control. My hands steadied as resolve replaced hesitation. Whatever happened next, this truth would not disappear quietly again. It demanded to be carried into light, even if it burned. Holding it felt heavier than I expected. This was not information. This was accountability, solid and undeniable. That was when headlights swept across the windows. The sound of an engine cut through the stillness, sharp and immediate. Fear surged again, different now, focused. We no longer had the luxury of hiding what we knew. The truth was in my hands, and danger was already walking back toward the house. I barely had time to react before the house exploded into motion. Footsteps echoed, doors opened, voices sharpened. The calm that had ruled this place shattered, and I understood that control had been lost. Fear no longer hovered. It charged. I felt it slam into my body as presence filled the room, heavy and furious. The truth I carried was no longer hidden, and that made me dangerous. The first strike came suddenly, not as pain but as shock. The sound, the movement, the helpless rage of watching someone I cared about fall because they tried to protect me. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Fear did not disappear. It transformed. I stopped thinking about consequences. I thought about survival. I thought about keeping others alive. I moved without hesitation, pulled by instinct sharper than terror. That was when I realized this was bigger than one man losing his temper. Other figures appeared, silent, waiting, carrying the weight of enforcement rather than emotion. This was not chaos. This was a system responding to threat. Everything blurred, shouting, crashing furniture, the sound of my heart pounding louder than reason. Any remaining illusion of family collapsed. What stood in its place was raw power, unmasked and willing to harm. We ran. Not bravely, not cleanly. We ran because staying meant disappearance. I remember being grabbed, falling, the panic of thinking it was over, then movement again, a chance opening where none should exist. When I crossed into the night, breath burning my lungs, I did not know who would follow or who would survive. I only knew I could not go back. The house behind me held violence now, and nothing would ever make it safe again. That knowledge stayed with me, steady and cold, as the night swallowed everything whole. I remember the moment the noise stopped and everything slowed. We were safe enough to ask for help, though safe did not mean calm. My hands shook as I gave over what we had taken, proof that felt heavier than my own body. For the first time, someone listened without dismissing the fear in my voice. Belief was quiet. It came in nods, in careful questions, in the way the room did not rush me. Still, waiting was torture. Every hour stretched, filled with worry for those we left behind and dread over what power might still reach us. When intervention finally came, it was not dramatic. It was procedural, controlled, almost ordinary. Doors were knocked on. Statements were taken. The house that once terrified me was treated like evidence, not authority. That shift mattered more than I expected. Surviving did not feel like victory. My body ached, my sleep fractured, and guilt settled in waves. Justice did not erase what happened, it only acknowledged it. And even then, resistance appeared quickly, wrapped in lawyers and influence, delaying consequences and clouding certainty. But something fundamental had changed. The truth was no longer trapped inside me. It existed on record, in hands beyond their control. I learned that justice does not arrive to save you. It arrives because you refuse to stay silent. The fight was far from over. Yet for the first time since my wedding night, the future felt possible, fragile and unfinished, but no longer owned by fear alone. That knowledge steadied me through the long wait ahead. When the truth came out, the money disappeared first. Accounts froze, properties emptied, rooms once guarded fell quiet. Power shrank without ceremony, leaving behind ordinary lives forced into the light. My days became smaller. I learned the rhythm of modest work. Early mornings, simple meals, silence that no longer felt threatening. Safety arrived not as comfort, but as routine. I slept, woke, and breathed without checking doors. The sister rebuilt herself through purpose. She chose work that helped others, not to redeem herself, but to stay honest. The mother withdrew from influence and learned what accountability actually costs. Loss followed them, but so did relief. My husband faded from authority into consequence. The absence of control stripped away illusion. What remained was responsibility, carried quietly, without sympathy or spectacle. For me, healing did not look like happiness. It looked like steadiness, like choosing truth even when it made life smaller. Fear loosened its grip slowly, replaced by recognition from strangers who saw me as human, not a headline. The world did not celebrate us, it adjusted, and that was enough. The life I live now is plain, sometimes lonely, often hard, but it is mine. No secrets, no shadows, no borrowed power, just honesty, effort, and the quiet peace of knowing what was broken will never own me again. That understanding carries me forward, steady and unafraid, toward reflection, meaning, and the final reckoning of what this story taught me. When I look back now, the story no longer feels sharp. It feels settled. Distance has softened the fear without erasing the truth, and that balance is what peace actually looks like. I learned that silence is never neutral. It protects power, not people. Courage was not loud or heroic for me. It was choosing to speak when staying quiet felt safer, choosing honesty when it cost comfort, choosing boundaries when love demanded sacrifice. What I lost was real: security, status, certainty. But what replaced it was something steadier: self-respect, clarity, the ability to sleep without fear and wake without shame. Truth did not give me an easier life. It gave me an honest one. This story is not just mine. Many of us have stood at the edge of something wrong, wondering if our voice mattered. It does, even when it trembles, especially then. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. Your listening mattered more than you know. Stories like this survive because someone is willing to hear them. If this experience connects to your own life in any way, I invite you to reflect. Have you ever had to choose between silence and truth? And what did that choice cost you? I read every response with care and gratitude because shared truth lightens hidden burdens.